Tēnā mana, tēnā reo, tēnā karanatanga maha, tēnā koutou. Ko Wendy Lana toko ingoa. It's a great pleasure to welcome you here this evening. I'm the Provost of Te Haringawaka, Victoria University of Wellington. That's my day job. But I have the enormous privilege on top of my day job of being the current chair of the Fulbright New Zealand board. And it's in that capacity that I am welcoming you here this evening to this very special Fulbright New Zealand event. This year, 2021, marks the 75th anniversary of the global Fulbright program. And what's happening all around the world is that Fulbright commissions like our own are hosting special events to mark this anniversary. So tonight you're part of Aotearoa's special event. The event is being recorded. You can see the camera up there. And it will go on to the Fulbright 75th anniversary website as part of that wider commemoration. Now, while Fulbright might be turning 75, we actually get a double opportunity because Fulbright New Zealand will not turn 75 for another couple of years. So we'll have another party in another couple of years. So do consider yourself invited already. And we look forward to celebrating that as another special year for us. I suspect many of you, if not all of you in the room, like myself, are Fulbright alumni. So you do know the significance of Fulbright and the significance of this 75th anniversary event. An event to mark Senator William J. Fulbright's introduction in 1946 of the groundbreaking legislation that laid the foundation for the Fulbright program that so many of us have benefited from. This is a program that has gone on to be one of the most prestigious and longest running international education exchanges in the world. And again, another helpful bit of information that I myself only learned today. Aotearoa was the 5th country in the world to join Fulbright by bilateral treaty. So we were really early partners in this great dream that Senator Fulbright had about the possibilities that such a program might offer. Now, one of the things that really impresses me about the Fulbright program is how it continues to foster deep connections amongst people long after the scholarship recipients have finished their awards. If we look at the list in New Zealand, Fulbright alumni represent some of the absolute best in their fields. They're found excelling across a huge range of disciplines: science, education, culture, and crucially, in terms of tonight's discussion, visual arts. And when you talk to Fulbright alumni, as I suspect we're going to hear tonight, what we so often hear are the narratives about the extraordinary impact of that experience for people, that transformative moment that often the Fulbright experience is. Now, the artists that we're so looking forward to hearing from tonight are leading lights, and we're so happy that you've joined us and are going to be part of our discussion. And I personally am really looking forward to hearing much more about their work as practicing artists. But as anyone who knows me in the audience will know, practicing art's a long way away from what I as a geographer do as my day job. So I am going to pass over to someone who is much better qualified than me to chair tonight's panel, the director of the Adam Art Gallery, writer, teacher, art historian, Fulbright alumni, Associate Professor Tina Barton. So thank you again so much for joining us this evening, and Tina, over to you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Wendy, for your very kind introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'll be just explaining what we're going to be doing in a moment, but I have a few prefatory remarks before we begin. I've been instructed by the National Library, however, to run through the emergency protocols, which is a requirement of using this venue. So bear with me as I very briefly tell you that in the event of a fire alarm, you have to make your way out of the auditorium using the aisle closest to you, go out the doors onto Aitken Street, along the road to Guthrie Lane where there's a construction site, and wait there for further instruction. In the event of an earthquake, you have to get into the brace position, leaning forward, putting your hands on your head, and don't run outside. There may be falling debris. Once the shaking has stopped, please wait for instructions. This apparently is one of the safest buildings in Wellington, so it's much safer to stay inside. If for any reason instructions are otherwise, just follow what the library staff tell you. And in the event of any other alert or emergency, please stay calm and await instructions from library staff. If we are required to evacuate, there's an exit next to the lectern, down here, or through the doors that you entered in. And if there's an emergency of a more personal nature, apparently there are toilets located outside the auditorium and right again through the glass doors. So, what a pleasure to be invited to introduce and converse with our three invited artists, all Fulbright alumni: Steve Carr, Leanne Williams, and Anne Noble. As Wendy mentioned, I too am an alumna of Fulbright, having received a travel award in 2009 to visit New York. On the strength of this support, I was able to visit a range of university art galleries and meet my equivalents to compare notes on our operations. This was an eye-opening experience that I shall always cherish. I was also able to undertake research that flowered later when Adam Art Gallery hosted a major exhibition by the extraordinary sculptor who uses light to sculpt in time and space, the British-born New York-based Anthony McCall, who I was able to meet on that trip and who then visited New Zealand to install his work in 2010. And a decade after that trip, I saw the research I undertook on the New York years of the recently departed conceptual artist Billy Apple manifest in the book on his life and work that I published just last year. So I fully appreciate the value Fulbright brings to those of us involved in the visual arts, and I hope some of that value and its ongoing nature will be drawn out as we enter into the discussion. Since taking up this invitation to chair the event tonight, I've started looking into the opportunities Fulbright has provided New Zealand artists and art professionals. And from the material that's been made available to me so far, it looks like the painter and educator Ray Thorburn might have been the first artist to receive an award back in 1973. And earlier this year, Adam Art Gallery included some paintings by Emma McIntyre, Fulbright's most recent recipient, who at the beginning of the year was still studying for her MFA at Cal Arts in Los Angeles. She completed those paintings in her back garden of the little apartment that she was renting while the city was in lockdown due to the COVID pandemic. But despite the challenges she faced, these new paintings had a special vibrancy and spark I'd not seen before. So our plan this evening is for each artist to come up to the lectern to talk briefly about their work. And then we'll all settle down here in the chairs, and I'll tease out some questions I've prepared that will allow them to elaborate on their Fulbright experiences. I'm going to give you brief introductions to all of the artists now, all together, and then I'm going to invite Steve and then Leanne and then Anne simply to come up and undertake their presentations. They're planning to speak for around 5 minutes. They've each got a sort of 10-minute slot. So expect some very interesting visuals and some discussion of their work in just a moment. So first up is Steve Carr, who's a multidisciplinary artist based in Christchurch, where he teaches at Ilam School of Art at the University of Canterbury. Steve is a contemporary artist who produces thought-provoking objects and images that articulate what art writer Anthony Burt has called a trickster sensibility. I'm not sure what he's going to show us tonight, but I have a vivid recall of exploding watermelons and paint-filled balloons, pizza box oil paintings, and tyres cast in bronze. Steve was the Fulbright Wallace Trust Award winner in 2012 and spent 3 months in an artist residency at the Headlands Centre of Art in San Francisco. Next up will be Leanne Williams, who is one half with Jim Dennison, who is also here, but he's elected to stay seated during your presentation, of the Crystal Chain Gang, who have joined us tonight from Martinborough. Before I really encountered their work, I swore they were a rock band. So I now appreciate that they are a highly creative duo who produce the most beautiful glass art using lead crystal. And I'll leave it to Leanne to tell you more, but it is important to note that Leanne and Jim were recipients of a Fulbright Fellowship in 2008 that enabled them to attend the Creative Glass Centre of America at Wheaton Arts and Cultural Centre in Cumberland County, New Jersey. This is home to the Museum of Glass and hosts the Creative Glass Fellowship Program, which provides contemporary glass artists with the facilities, equipment, time, and housing to further develop their art. I looked into where Wheaton was, and I was fascinated to learn that it's home to one of the largest glass manufacturers in the US, and South Jersey saw the establishment of the very first factory to produce glass as far back as 1739. And finally, we'll have Anne Noble, who is one of our most distinguished photographers. Recently retired from her position at Massey University's School of Art, she's been recognised and celebrated through her long career for her deeply researched but formally exquisite images of natural sights and her remarkable human and non-human portraits. Anne received a Fulbright Fellowship to attend Columbia College in Chicago in 2014. And she's actually got an exhibition of her latest work on at the moment in Wellington at Bartley and Company, a show called In a Forest Dark. So I'm now going to hand over to Steve. I hope you know how to make all of the equipment work. And beware of this cord down here. Okay. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you. Right. Hang on, let's see if I do know how to do it. I do. Hey, thank you for this. Look, I'm going to focus on just 3 film works. As Tina said, I work in photography, sculpture, and moving image. But these were, the watermelon work, which you actually mentioned, was one of the works I made after returning from Headlands. And the tablecloth pull and even Tiger Girls was some works that I was reflecting on during my time at Headlands. So the residency in San Francisco was a pretty amazing thing in terms of there was no expectation on making things there. They just wanted you to kind of absorb research, consider ideas, and then with this understanding that outcomes will happen over time, which was a really amazing and freeing thing, because I've done a few residencies and sometimes you arrive and within the 3rd day they'll want to know what you're making and wanting to organise that. So I just thought I'd focus on some of these films here and looking at some of the research that I was looking at the time. I'm not going to play 33 minutes of this, but this is Watermelon. Some of you may have seen it. It was at the City Gallery, probably 3 or 4 years ago, I think. And this is, I guess what happened in San Francisco was this idea of thinking around how long a moment can be drawn out and what will hold people's attentions. And I was really thinking about ways in which we see things or how things are delivered to us and subverting that. So this work came from considering these guys, the slow-mo guys, who are a very famous duo who have got a phantom camera, and they do things, they blow things up and they film it. And I was interested in doing the work, which was in essence completely sort of in opposition to what they do, the things that they get excited about. So with the slow-mo guys, it's always about them. It's always about their reactions. And of course, when we get to this point, they really speed it all up because that's boring. And of course, 20 minutes later, they come to this point where it explodes. And it's got the dramatic music, and it's got the slow motion, all that kind of stuff. And I was actually thinking about how maybe the work is about tension and not about the money shot, which is what they tend to be, and the silly face and the reaction. So this work became more of a formal exercise in a way, and it became about getting two sisters who had very almost identical hands, working in unison and hypnotically, slowly applying these rubber bands for 30 odd minutes. I also really like this when you consider the format of moving image as well. Like with everything on the internet, you do what I'm about to do now, which is you kind of speed through. And you can start to sort of speed all that up. And I like the idea that film could be this thing that you witness in the space and at the time, and that your experience is that encounter when you're in the gallery or wherever that may be. Seems you've come all this way. I'll let you see that. There's probably a bit more than that. Oops. That's not working very well, sorry. So I was thinking, that was basically a lot of the thoughts I was having around that. I'll just sort of move on to some of the films that, earlier films that I'd done, which were kind of dealing with the same thing, but never to that kind of length. I guess it was really experimental. It was this idea of not knowing how long people would sit with something. Whereas this film from 2007 it seems quite long, but it's only a minute long. But it seems long because it's a lot of waiting, and it was a lot of these films come from really weird places. This inspiration for this work was thinking about Ghostbusters, and there's this really wonderful moment where the slime's going around, the slime ghost is destroying everything in the hotel, and everything's completely messed up, but there's this one table there that's untouched, and Bill Murray kind of goes there and lines himself up and pulls it and completely stuffs it up, and says, "I've always wanted to do that." And I thought there's something kind of lovely and magical about the failure. And I was thinking about, this idea of not learning how to do it, and also not researching it, and then just doing this moment, capturing it on film, one take, and letting the kind of honest moment of that tension hopefully come through. Sorry, something wrong with the timing there of the the double gag. Not normally like that. That surprise trickster. So that was. I came from a performance background as well, so I was really interested in that. And I just come out of art school, and there's a few things I did to that work to make sure that it would be. That there would be this tension there. It's got this marble floor, and the restaurant that I was in said that I didn't need to pay anything for it. I just had to cover the cost of all the things that I broke. And I remember looking down, and like each wine glass was about $70 each, and it was really expensive. And I just started freaking out, thinking, "How am I going to afford this?" Luckily, they said it was fine. And I didn't have to cover anything. But yeah, this is sort of the earlier research as well.
In,
which I'll try
I
and
will
turn
not
that down
make
a
you
bit.
pay.
Oops. So it's very sensitive. But again, a lot of the work that I was thinking about was kind of subverting that or doing the reverse to what we see. You know, as I was saying, I was quite interested in...
No, not that one! Oh.
So I like this work for a couple of reasons. One, I like it because it's completely genuine. And it's also got this relationship of the father and the daughter. He's very chuffed with himself. And, that's going to play again, sorry. And then, but it also made me think about, you know, the kind of the strangeness of recording failure. You know, you put that on the internet because you do the impossible shot. And I quite liked that the film of the tablecloth, which keeps smashing at this time out of sequence, is it's quite good. Becomes this thing where people have seen this film when it's played in a space and it's looping. They've talked about they just expect that eventually I'll get it, and I quite enjoyed that. I also first showed that work in an exhibition full of glassworks, which you'll probably appreciate, Leanne. That when it's so, and I remember the security guard coming up to me and said, "I've never been so stressed in my life," because every time I'm around the corner, I hear this smash and I think everything's broken. So I kind of like that sort of part as well. So I'm very short on time, so I'll finish up with this one here, which is a very, very old work, 2004. That's me in the middle. Not wearing the... this was a... I'll just play it because it's very quiet. This was a work I made in response to Tiger Bear getting in touch with a whole lot of artists and wanting us to make these works. And I came up with a few ideas, and they really didn't want that. And they gave us like $200 to make a work. And they said they really want to film. And I'm like, you realise I shoot on 16mm, 35mm, $200 is not going to do anything. It's not going to get anywhere near it. And then I realised, actually, these guys just want an ad. So I gave them an ad, except instead of being 30 seconds long, it's... I think it's about 10 minutes. It's 10 minutes long. So my ad idea was, guy drinks Tiger Beer with pretty girls who... and I was also riffing off the fact that, hope no one's from Tiger Beer here, is Tiger Beer is also really offensive in the way that they do their advertising. They're very Asian in the sense that they take from Japanese culture, Singapore, all these different mishmashes of stuff, and that's why I've got this color grade on it. So I was sort of playing with that sort of idea as well. So kind of being sort of anti what they were doing while still trying to do it at the same time. And this got played at one of their parties, which I think they all thought it was great. And then about 3 years later, they made an ad with this, but it was 30 seconds long. Not me as the actor though. This is, again, it's just this very simple premise of me drinking 6 beers and having these girls. There's no instructions to what they want to do, so it becomes a bit odd for them. I think the only instruction was don't look at the camera. The one on the left here with who's about to film away now, she's Brazilian, she can't speak any English. And the rest were sort of flatmates and people that I kind of knew at the time. very simple shots, and then, sorry. So the only thing that happens during this film is just one sort of cinematic moment which is, not really much of an action, but something happens where the camera pans back to reveal more beer, more girls, and leads the jets off. But again, I guess it was that moment of trying to make something that would annoy them and kind of feel like they got delivered something that wasn't successful. But there's something kind of, there's something that works. I still quite like this work, even though it was made for one intention. I like that it's almost like a teenage boy's fantasy that when it comes to fruition just sort of falls flat. And you don't know what to do. So I like that. I really like the awkwardness to this film. I didn't end up marrying the one to my right though, so it worked out all right in the end. Cool. Hey, thank you. I'll get you set up for the next one.
Okay. Kia ora koutou. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight and actually talk to you all, and it's given us time to reminisce as well on our travels that we had in 2008 and 9 to America. So it's been a really good week for us looking back. So thank you, Fulbright. I'm part of a creative duo with Jim Dennison. We're the Crystal Chain Gang. We've been working together since 2003. We kind of came together and we made a quite a political decision in our eyes to work together as a collaborative duo with a kaupapa that was sort of non-hierarchical and took away the emphasis from the individual artist, and we've worked together ever since, in good times and in bad. It has its moments, but anyway, that's what we are. So we still continue as a collaborative practice today, and we build on each other's skills. And what we've really highlighted in our career together, which is 19 years, 20 years, is to push the boundaries of glass in New Zealand has been our thing. So what that's done is we've sort of developed quite a hybrid practice, and we blend between art, craft was really important, and so was design. So we sort of bounce around in those areas. And in those 20 years, sometimes we create an intellectual stimulation for people. Sometimes it's emotional, but most of the time we do pretty well. Okay, so we live in Martinborough. We brought up our son over there, and we have a studio there, and we've successfully run a art business, which is pretty good, I have to say. So we primarily work in glass, and we focus on pushing those New Zealand boundaries. Okay, let's get on with it. So this image here, this was the first bit of collaborative work that Jim and myself did together in 2003. It's called M42. This piece of work was what we did was glass roses. We made a whole lot of roses out of icing, and we turned them into glass through a process. We made this sheep and this carcass, and sent it over to Denmark, to a show in Denmark, where it still lives today. The Iveltoft Glass Museum in Denmark picked it up immediately, and all the photos that went with it, so we were pretty lucky. It made a splash in New Zealand and overseas, so it was quite good. So we kind of ended up, how did you push? You pushed down here. Oh, I can push here. We ended up, for about 3 years beyond that work, making works around the same sort of idea, which was really, looking at the exotic and our history and our land and social history, land history. So we sort of, spent quite a bit of time making bits of meat and things out of glass. But and this was Bonnie, and this is of reference to it. This piece is actually in the American Glass Museum. They procured that piece of work as well. And that museum is alongside Wheaton Arts. So that's the piece of glass that went there. So we sort of had this history, but a lot of it's quite, it's craft, we're crafting here. And so it's a lot of work and it's quite laborious in its nature. And we were starting to look at glass history and really looking at glass and its sense of what is it. And we got really excited by chandeliers. And so this was the first chandelier that we made. And again, it's all cast crystal. And this one was, we love the chandeliers because they are eloquent and beautiful, but they're also a statement of excess for us. And so this first chandelier was Rest in Peace. So this was in reference to collecting and trophy hunting. We thought that this was the chandelier that Sir Walter Buller could have, who's now, disgraced as a conservationist. This would hang in his house. While creating this chandelier, we realised we had to find a better process because it was so long. And so we actually thought, okay, we've got to get a little bit more savvy, economical, and so that we can fulfil some of our dreams. So this is when Fulbright came into being. And so we went off to Fulbright. What was? We went off to America to a residency at Wheaton Arts, which is the American Centre of Contemporary Glass. We were there for 6 weeks, and we were able to learn new processes, gain lots of skills from a whole wide range of team there. Our biggest need was to make multiple pieces a little bit faster and cost efficient. I mean, I hate to say that, but it's just that with glass. And so we came back from overseas and we spent a bit of time on some domestic pieces trying to work out how we're going to hang these. But this was our first real successful piece that we made. And this one is called Fistful of Feathers. So this one's down in the waterfront in the lobby of the Infotel building. So this sort of kick-started us off into making, big chandeliers. Well, the possibility of making works that were a little bit more larger scale and more interesting. So off we went. Now we sort of find ourselves in a place of design, industry, dealer galleries, public and private art commissions. And while the chandeliers have increased popularity, we also really get a bit shivered by it at times in the sense that we still want to make art. So we kind of juggle, we juggle. And so we try. And so we kind of, at these chandeliers, they're within, commercial settings, they're within private homes. That's how we make a living, I guess, through this. And then we think, what were we here for? We need to make art. So we sort of, we go off and we make sculptures for dealer galleries and alike. And then when we start making these things, we sort of think, maybe we can join the two together. So we went off and for the Douse solo show, which is we're in 2016, we managed to make this chandelier and combined two processes and start to look at pulling things together. I mean, it's kind of interesting because we're breaking ground in our sense in glass and in New Zealand in terms of what we do. But it's funny, you look back and you think, was it that, isn't that Yeah, is it good? Anyway. But I shall the next piece is this is the Sergeant Centennial Chandelier, and this was done for their celebration. And this chandelier is going to reside between the two buildings. They've got an extension, so this will sit in a stairwell in their two buildings. And there it is there. So we sort of we try and challenge ourselves anyway. And this piece we did last year, this one was, the latest piece that we've made that really pushed us. We did it for a show up at Aotearoa Museum in Wairarapa. And it sort of has, it's a new chapter for us in the sense that it's a combination between ceramics and glass. And it's also pushing, it's pushing the idea in art a little bit further than the domestic setting. So we're just trying to play with that. So that piece there, that was actually, we went in 2019, not to America, but to Italy, to Venice and Murano, and we were there for 3 weeks and spent a lot of time in the glass area of Murano. And so this is informed at the same time with the overwhelming, amazing experience of Venice, So this is what we came home and we made. So the travel side of things, I think it's really important. It's incredibly uplifting for adults. Artists. Thanks, Fulbright, for awarding us, because it's been an amazing opportunity. When we came back from our travels overseas, I wrote an article for Art News, and I read that again this week because I hadn't seen it for ages. So I went back and I read it, and it was just the first, there was lots in this article, but I just loved the snippet at the beginning because neither Jim or myself had been to America before. And so we arrived in JFK in New York, and it was just like, wow. It just was just mind-blowing. And so this is just a little bit of writing from that, so I'm just going to read it. It's not much, it's not. So touching down at JFK, the adrenaline kicks in. We finally catch a glimpse of downtown New York as we're en route to Wheaton Arts Centre in Melville, Philadelphia. The avenues stretch to the horizon, the buildings to the sky. At 7 a.m, the city had a strange feeling like a hangover, just waking up. Very exciting, completely hanging out for New York, but alas, we had to hurry with our suitcases in hand for Penn Station and Amtrak's to Philadelphia. Hanging outside Philadelphia Station, Sopranos lingering in our mind. This is 2008? Yeah. Lingering in our mind, a black BMW pulls up. Hank Murder Adams, artistic director of Wheaton Arts, jumps out of his car with his pit bull, Jude. And we jump in, and honestly, completely crazy, fanatic, and full speed. He debriefs us all the way to Wheaton Art Facility, giving us a crash course in the history of Wheaton, which you've alluded to, the history of Wheaton and the art mandate for that facility. All the while swerving, honk, 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 swerve, 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 and patting the dog on his lap. So for both of us two, we were struggling to keep our eyes open actually, because it was just such an, we had enough. We had travelled quite a long way, so we were keeping our eyes open. But that crazy fanatic obsessive thing lasted for the next 6 weeks we were there. It was absolutely amazing, and it became a 2-prong trip for us. Well, no, we went later. 2009, we went back and we talked at the American Glass Conference and gave demos at the American Glass Conference. So we were doubly rewarded with America, and both of those experiences has been incredibly pivotal to our career and where we are today and how we actually still present ourselves and make things. So, yee-haw to Fulbright. It's great. Thank you very much.
Great, I've got the tool. Great, kia ora tātou. Thank you very much for the invitation to reflect on a Fulbright experience. You know, really is to celebrate 75 years of Fulbright and what is 73 years for New Zealand, which is it's a phenomenal kind of relationship that I think is lively and ongoing. And what I thought I'd do is, here we are. What I'll do is just, I'd like to walk through, as I reflected on what I would present in 5 minutes, when a 5-month Fulbright of experience I could speak for hours about. I thought I'd take just a little journey through the process of conceiving a project, presenting it to Fulbright, and then taking up an opportunity which really is truly extraordinary and has resulted in a kind of, I suppose, endless ongoing opportunities for development of my work and relationship. So my project begins with bees. I'm an artist, a beekeeper, photographer. I work with video, sound, and I took a kind of passion with me to a Fulbright application. So it began in my garden, watching my bees swarm, encountering a hive of dead bees, engaging with a scientist who was investigating the circadian clock of bees, which I discovered is the same as a human being. The biological connection between humans and animals is profound. So to my questions that emerged, which they do for artists in very strange ways through all of these kind of narrative threads, how might art speak to issues of biodiversity loss, considering the bee as an indicator species, but as something barely visible to us and at the head of an invisible world at risk? So a very open question that is the kind of, it's a question for artists, but also runs very close to what scientists are also thinking about. So I think I set about, as instructed and advised, to spend quite a lot of time thinking about why the United States, where might I go? And I put out feelers. And I think my journey through this process is really part of my practice, which is to live by chance. So where do the opportunities emerge, and how does one then respond and pick up and run with things? I approached Columbia College in Chicago. They have an international residency program that I didn't know about by chance. The head of the school was someone I'd actually exhibited with by chance. And they have, alongside, an eminent Museum of Contemporary Photography. So I was offered an international residency, and it was the first moment for me where I realised that Fulbright means something. You know, when you bring an opportunity to be a Fulbrighter in the States, the doors open in quite miraculous ways. So what I'll do is I'm going to briefly show some of the work, which began, I arrived Columbia College, welcomed, given a studio, connected with faculty, and was given really carte blanche, a little like Steve said, to really just to be present and to be a kind of an add-on to the project, to the program. So I was artist in resident, thinker, critic, and artist at large. I input into the master's program at a really interesting point as the students are coming up to their end of their 3 years, and took opportunities to connect with them. Many of these students became assistants on projects that I was working on, and I had an open studio once a week where those students would come and actually show me their work, and we would engage in conversation. So I was welcomed, and I began then really this journey of operating by chance. Bees how do I make connections? I reached out to the professional and amateur beekeeping community, and on my second day, what fed back to me was a beekeeper who had recently lost their entire colonies through pesticide drift across the land where his hives were. I rang him and asked him if he would keep a colony of dead bees in his fridge, and I would go and collect them. And here they are in the floor in the evenings of our apartment, 24 floors up, overlooking Lake Michigan across the top of the Obama view of the Obama apartment on the top of the Hilton. It was the most extraordinary place to be. And in the evenings, much to my husband's horror, we would sit there plucking bee wings. And I amassed a pile of some thousands of the wings of dead bees, which really was where a project then began. And I'll walk you through some of this sort of really chance kind of engagement with processes to develop ways to address that really important question that I began with. So here is a thinking through process. I collected these dead bees, wings of dead bees, and invented a photogram process whereby I would work with film, completely blind in the dark, and scatter bee wings onto the film, roll the film up into a kind of a ball, and then expose that through my hands. Now, this is imagining a process, really, but also predicting a result. And these are some of the results, which were really, for many reasons, extraordinary. What I realised I was doing was turning my body into a camera. And the kind of surprise of colour, which is the colour of flesh with light passing through it, actually colouring the surface of the film. And there is no lens involved, so these images of wings are made purely by the tracery of light. So a process that was invented, I worked with students who really, this mad bee wing photographer was kind of needed quite a lot of help in the darkroom to hold the lights and not bang into things in the dark, because you can't turn a light on when you're actually doing this. So this really roll of film was experimented with endlessly until I had numbers of these, which have formed the basis of one strand of this work. I'll perhaps... Now, so the second thing I did was, or that I wanted to do as a Fulbrighter, was to really reach beyond beekeeping communities to scientists. I, again, by chance, was put in touch with a bee scientist at Texas A&M University at a town called College Station out of Houston, Texas. Now, this would never have occurred to me in a million years. It's an agricultural university, heavy science, 67,000 students, numerous research laboratories, and this fantastic bee research facility. I rang Juliana Rengels, who someone had given me their name. She welcomed me with an invitation to spend a week in her lab and participate in a facilitated exchange between artists and scientists. And the gathering was really extraordinary. There are multiple extremely well-funded research centres. There are 5 in this huge university that are headed by women. So it was a privileged welcome and a wonderful week of exchanges. In the tour of her laboratory, she opened the door of what she described as a failed project. Artists love failed projects, by the way. I'll just echo Steve there. And this was the results of it was a morphological study of bee wings. And, here was I again with thousands of bee wings that had actually been collected by a scientist to examine and scrutinise through kind of scientific imaging technologies to discover kind of distinctions between their wings. And one of the things that they were looking for was could you distinguish a species of bee by the pattern of light reflected off the surface of the wings? Now, I found the labour of science in this endeavour extraordinary. And, one of my favourite inspirations is Goethe, who actually coined the term morphology in about 1797, I think. And I've been a kind of really interested in his kind of philosophy of science as a kind of combination between poetry and scientific observation, and the quality of a full embodied approach to observation of the world. So I worked in this laboratory with some really amazing scientific lighting equipment, using my cell phone as a backlight for wings from this collection to actually pay a little homage to the notion of morphology, but with a kind of poetic sensibility in response. So I've worked further back in Chicago, work experimenting with tintype technologies, and it produced a number of works. So, I think that is one small strand of something that I pursued, and made possible by kind of the chance relationships that were possible and the kind of welcome being a Fulbright presented. And I'll briefly conclude by just summarising this other, here it is. This was something that I took with me on my studio wall, and I ended up while there working with some fashion students to make a medieval bee suit that is featured in some sound works that I developed when I came back. But so just to conclude, the opportunity for connections was terrific. Being a Fulbrighter meant often an open door. Wherever I went, I took with me lectures on New Zealand art and photography, and connected with a number of MFA programs at Parsons, New York, Syracuse, University of Arizona, and Arizona State University, where I gave a presentation to an interdisciplinary master's paper that brought together geologists, psychologists, artists, photographers, to look at the implications of the future of water in Phoenix, Arizona. So some wonderful models of interdisciplinarity actually, really came back to inform our own postgraduate program developments. So really, Fulbright provided huge inspiration for ongoing collaboration, which really I'm entirely indebted for the book that has just been kind of launched a month ago. So, began with Fulbright. Thank you very much, Fulbright, and congratulations.
Thank you, Anne, Leanne, and Steve. Can I invite you all to come up and take your chairs there? I'm now going to turn this into a much more informal conversation. Okay. Each of you have really explored and explained what you did while you were away, and I think everyone has got some insights into what you got from it. But I was just thinking, I don't know if it was all your first experiences going to America on your Fulbrights, but I was just wondering if you could reflect on what your ideas were of America and what your expectations were of America before you went, and then what your experience was once you got there. I know for myself that my very first trip to America was before Fulbright, when I was a 21-year-old backpacker, and I went to the West Coast, and I went to the Grand Canyon, and I explored the deserts because I'd loved cowboy movies when I was growing up. And I only got to New York at the very end of the trip, and this is long before I was interested in art. And once I got to New York, I suddenly realized that this country is enormous, and it's so different, and the city was so exciting. And of course, I had to go back. And going back many years later to really immerse myself in the art world was another kind of experience and an endorsement of all the reading that I'd done and all of the thinking that I had done and all of the exposure to not only American art, but to the history of art that I had learnt through reading American scholarship. So I'm just wondering if each of you could think about what your expectations were, what your idea of America was, and then how it played out for you when you got there. And I think you've each got your own...
I can go. Yeah, sure. Well, like you're saying, a lot of my research and all that. When I applied for the Headlands residency in San Francisco, part of the excitement of going there, and it was my first trip to America as well, was that so many of the artists that I really respected, particularly around the sort of 70s performance and the early use of video and art making, they came from that area. And I think you're going to ask this as well, because about New York, because like New York was always the place that is the place to go to for art. But we did with the Fulbright, we got to travel to New York afterwards as well. But the San Francisco, that scene, artists Vito Conchi and in particular, who was a huge influence on me at the time, just being in Berkeley, being where he taught. There's something kind of really magical about that, and also the scene, the music scene, and noise music and all that kind of stuff that's in San Francisco, which is more underground. That was really amazing to experience. America's somewhere where I've always wanted to go, and it was for some reason I felt like my work would translate really well in an American audience, but obviously I'd never tested that, so I wanted to do that. And the Headlands thing also gave the opportunity for my wife to join me for the second half, and that was kind of interesting for the fact that there was me, who always wanted to be there, and Anna, who had never really thought of America as a place she wanted to visit, but just totally fell in love with the place and the people. And like a lot of what you're saying resonated with me as well, about the scale of it and even just the differences. I've really found with San Francisco this overwhelming generosity and wanting to help and politeness, and then New York being not rude but quick, and I really love that too. So and I think as an artist to go to these galleries that you've read about and actually being in it is actually just it's really sublime. It's really incredible, and seeing these shows that you'll never forget. I can name lots of them. Paul McCarthy for one. Just seeing a show of his that was so big that the Gagazian had to remove the roof to put it in. These sorts of things. It didn't happen in Hamilton. So, but.
Yes, I think, you asked the question, why America, why the United States? And I think Fulbright, I think, is matured in that, when I was at art school, certainly our sources of inspiration were United States, Eastern Europe for me, Japan. And I think there is real interest in the United States, in New Zealand, for many, many reasons. And I think what we can offer as artists is really taking our work and our thoughts the other way. And I think we have an enormous amount to offer that we're not only going to actually kind of touch the heights of American culture, we are actually bringing our own kind of heritage, lineage, and I think there's growing interest in that, and I certainly felt that. When I was introducing New Zealand photography, our concern with the environment, our mix and strength of kind of cultural kind of innovation, there's a lot that we bring the other way. So that notion of exchange that's cultural, educational, and through our disciplines is it's going from strength to strength. So why America? Well, I think for me it's what Fulbright offers, is unique. And certainly as an artist, I found that as there's all the wonderful asides. You know, you arrive. For me, arriving in America, there was the challenge to drop my reticence. You know, the encounters were so surprising sometimes that I was sort of shaken to the core. I wanted to be more like that. You know, I wanted to be able to bring the best of New Zealand with me. And I found I was able to do that. And besides, they love the New Zealand accent. You know, you're drawn out much more easily than you can imagine.
Just quickly before you jump in, I just want to elaborate on that as well, because that was when you talked about the surprises, that was something that really hit me, was how much New Zealand artists know about the art world and how well we make our work and how well we talk about our work. And I think that they were really surprised at my knowledge, and I'm no better than all my peers. That's just when you're in a small country isolated by yourself, you look outside a lot. And I found that artists in San Francisco didn't even know about artists in New York, and vice versa. There was this sort of scale to the space that made them go that this is the scene. And I found that really interesting, and that was one of my biggest reflections when I was there. Sorry, you back on. Yeah.
Okay, for us, we went to America and to Wheaton because it's actually a prestigious place to go for glass for many artists globally. It has great facilities and unlimited glass, so it was a draw card for us. We went with expectations, to have time to be able to create and make things and look at new processes. But our expectations were superseded by enormous amounts. We arrived and we had 3 assistants. We had never had assistants before, and we didn't know we were going to get assistants. So we had things planned, and then all of a sudden we realised, oh my goodness, we can actually, the sky's the limit. So it was unpaid, 3 people that we had to engage in as well as ourselves. So we had to think fast. We had to lead a team, because anything within the hot shop is team. There's no singular maker here. So we had to learn communication skills really quickly. It just blew us the way that we had to negotiate this new world, which was, really good for us in terms of, how our professional development from that. It was it was good. What else? I don't know, that's probably enough for now.
Reticence and reciprocation, I think those are really, really good words. I remember when I was in New York and I had set up a meeting to go and meet this artist, Anthony McCall, who showed with a very good gallery, Sean Kelly, in Chelsea. And I remember, catching the train to get there and being a little bit early and sort of going around the block too afraid to go in until the due moment, and being terrified by the process of being quizzed by the artist's dealer, and then meeting the artist and going into the behind the scenes of the gallery, which is so intimidating, and being ushered into the sort of library and office area, and tentatively putting forward my case that it would be lovely if this artist could come to New Zealand, and really being quizzed as to who I was and what I was doing. But once I'd broken through that, and I ended up going off to lunch, and suddenly there was this openness and enthusiasm. And I must say that from the other end of the process, after McCall had had a successful exhibition in New Zealand, and we're still in contact, and he still recalls the amazing trip that he had back here, what New Zealand has to offer back is quite extraordinary. He was able to visit some extraordinary landscapes and scenery. He encountered some amazing art collectors. He staged a very interesting exhibition, and he remembers it with tremendous fondness. And I think that actually my trepidation and fear, being a little person from New Zealand, was justified because the scene over there is just so much bigger. But also we gave something back. So I think that's an incredibly important lesson learned. But thinking about lessons learned, and Steve, I'm going back to you. You showed us a work, Watermelon, that was made after your time there, and then you showed us some much earlier works. Can you reflect again on just what shifted in your work through that experience? And maybe all of you could reflect on, what shifted. I know you produced work and I know you developed new skills, but could you embellish those comments a little further for us tonight?
Yeah, look, that's on. Yeah, I guess it was a real moment of reflection and thinking about the practice, and there was this real confidence in the way that the artists on the residency spoke about their work. They literally talked about an elevator pitch, and I'd get asked what my work was about, and this idea that I could, like, I'd even heard of an elevator pitch until I went there, but this idea that you can explain what your practice is within a couple of minutes, and I've really struggled to do that. And so that's why I started really looking back at some of the work that I was making and trying to find out, or just seeing what I was doing, the themes that were coming through, and reflecting at quite early works as well, and seeing what those connections were and ways in which that could be pushed. And I think this idea of duration and time and engagement, and also this idea of being in an audience who didn't know your work. Like, I think when you make work in your own country, people reflect on previous works that inform the work. So you can do works, for example. I look back at my career, and the early works were very slapstick and very funny. And because that was the case, I could then start making works that, like Tiger Girls, which is really unfunny but kind of awkwardly funny. And maybe that's funny because of other works that people know. But these are questions that I couldn't answer without an audience that didn't know the work. So that's kind of how that developed, was just thinking about what it was that could engage, could hold people's attentions, and why is it holding their attention, I guess, is what I really started thinking about. Yeah. And I also, the biggest change there as well, from someone who at the time was making a lot of films, is that I suddenly realised I had none of my kind of usual people, no cinematographers, all that community that I have to work on, I didn't have. So I ended up working with a lot of internet-based works and using that as a source as well. So it kind of shifted in the way that I realised I could make works. Because the work I actually made at Headlands was a work which is a bubble going towards a cactus. And that's the slow motion work. And I had this idea about making this work, a little bit like you were saying, you have these amazing, strange things happen, where I just Googled bubble cactus and up came this work that's exactly like what I wanted to do. And I ended up emailing the person who made it, who literally lived in like 5 minutes away. So I ended up having lunch with him, and he's a stock photographer who just happened to do it, and he gave me permission to use that work, and then I manipulated it more, but that made me realise that when I was looking at it, it's quite yellow because he used tungsten light. It wasn't lit the way that I do it, but I really kind of started really enjoying that. So it gave me this. So a big shift in that practice was sort of letting go of some of that control and allowing that sort of thing to come through. So, and that's came to the watermelon after that.
Where you go?
I've just been sitting here thinking quite a bit about our experience over there, and what was some of the things that was pivotal beyond just making the work, and I think for us, well, for me in particular, I can't speak for Jim, but for me in particular was some of the relationships we built and how we gained when we were there, the confidence and the ability to be able to talk a lot wider than what we had before here in New Zealand, because we were so immersed and we had so many people around us and lots of other artists in that centre as well, that it was a big social time as well, in the sense of lots of, you know, dinners and lots of talks. And over that time, for me, I just became a lot more confident about talking about, you know, our work, our ideas, but also for other people. It was just that exchange of you know, of that, I guess. And I think what I loved about Americans, actually in particular, was that they just shooted straight from the hip. There was no mucking about. There was no, you know, they were just so straightforward and refreshing and positive. And I gobbled that up and decided that was a really great way to be in life, and I took it from that experience there, because nothing really ever fazed them, and the people that we spent our time with were never negative. They were always positive, and they always, nothing was too big. Like everything was able. You were able to do and think of things. So, you know, I really appreciated that aspect from there. I'm not sure about Jim, I haven't picked his brain for a while about this, but anyway, yeah.
And Anne, have you got it?
Yes, a very interesting question. I mean, this is 6 years after my Fulbright. So, you know, what was seeded was a huge amount of work. But I'm thinking it's work made and a kind of publication that could never have happened without the experience of Fulbright. And that was really being open to taking risks and entering into conversations with people who I may never have met otherwise. So I'm thinking my experience in this, how did I end up in College Station, Texas? You know, it was an unforgettable week. And, you know, the relationship I formed with a team of scientists really continued to kind of open my mind to the importance of dialogue and conversation as a part of, you know, addressing really kind of big questions. It also gave me, I think, the confidence to actually, you know, stick with my questions. You know, alongside scientists, you know, who are, you know, I think I parallel my own idiosyncratic way of working, this notion of chance operating. I never believe that anything happens by chance, by the way. But to that of a scientist really pursuing a question but defining so clearly the manner in which it will be achieved. But artists can ask things like, what is the nature of hive consciousness? And muse on that in a way that's perfectly parallel to the kind of deep questions that scientists are asking. So a lot of my experience during Fulbright was really mining the possibility of kind of a new way to kind of practice myself. And I think it's changed the way I work completely. You know, projects for me now take a long time, and because dialogue and conversation is inherently a part of it. So, you know, anyway, so.
Oh, well, thank you for all your insights. I'm just aware of the time and wondering if there are questions from the floor, because I would love any... there's a question already. Do you want to...
Kia ora. Thanks for sharing your experience with us. You've all kind of talked about how transformative the experience has been in your experience of being in the United States. But I've been wondering, what's it meant to be a Fulbrighter for you guys once you return to the normality of coming back to New Zealand? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I think, well, for me, gratitude and appreciation of the value of something. And for the arts, and for art particularly, I think it's a really It's a rare opportunity to actually be supported within the framework of the Fulbright mission, which is really the benefits of it. It's one of the few kind of organisations that places culture at the heart of an exchange, and to have been part of that and to really be able to communicate the value of that within my own kind of university to other artists, I think it's part of what you bring back as a Fulbrighter. So I cherish it, and I really want it to be available for others. So.
Yeah, look, I guess I just echo what you're saying as well. I think I don't know how much people know about Fulbright in an arts sense of it, if I'm completely honest. And I think that, as an academic, at University of Canterbury, there's certainly this understanding around that. But I think I was surprised, and I know it's not quite answering your question, but I was really surprised at how much people respected and knew about it in America, and I think I was even joking before to Anne that even going through customs was easy. They was like, it was just quite amazing, and people were very excited, and it does actually open doors because there's so many artists and so many people making work that it gives a moment of interest for people to take you to want to look deeper into what you're doing. For me, the experience and it is a really great honour to have a Fulbright as well, but I just don't know if it's quite as well known through the visual arts, to be honest. I think, and I'm not quite sure what that is, but as you were saying, I'm constantly talking to people about applying for it and the benefits of it, and how amazing all that is, and I think and those people I know who have done it have massive shifts in their practice as well.
I had a very, very small travel award, so I'm not really a proper Fulbrighter, and I've never gone to a school reunion, so I'm not really a kind of alumni sort of person. But I do think that strong cultural relations between countries can actually make a difference to the direction a culture can take. And I think that the connection to America has been fostered and strengthened, and the interchange within the art system is there because of Fulbright. So, I think there's actual very practical outcomes that you can quantify and assess and see. And, we don't have a whole lot of people with deep, abiding connections, I don't know, to Poland or other places, but we do with America. And I think that has shaped the New Zealand art world. And before Fulbright, there were other ways in which connections with America were forged. So I think historically, there's a relationship that has developed.
I'm thinking back to your question, and I echo exactly the same as what Steve and Anne have spoken about as well. I think when, we did our residency in 2008, and when we came back, we were, for us in our sector, and particularly the craft sector, it was a prestigious thing to do, and also was spoken about, and we were, we put writing out there for the, so that was a really important thing for that connection at that time. As time goes on, I don't work in an academic institution, and so we're not always researching, or we don't have the ability to research all the time, unfortunately. So we don't live in that, the world of Fulbright all the time now. But what has come from that, going back to that, has just been incredibly informative and really important for us. And we continue with those relationships we made many, many moons go back. We still have those relationships. We all still talk to one another. We branch out over the world in terms of conferences and when we pull people together and come. So it's a you know, that grant gave us I guess a key to a club, in a sense, in terms of glass, for us to be able to tap into and make connections. And without that, we wouldn't have, you know, so it's quite important. So in New Zealand, here now, it's our input is important to, you know, what we see and what we know to what comes here, if that makes sense. So it does still keep giving, and it goes back to those relationships that were formed right back at the time.
Can I just add something? Because I think my understanding is that, you know, Fulbright is also a very, it's a broad school. It's not just universities. It's wānanga. It's open to professionals. It's open to a broad range of practitioners who just have something that they can take and then will bring something back. So, you know, the platform is broad, and I think that's unique about Fulbright as well. So it's not just university academics. It's any professional artist has an opportunity to embrace Fulbright and to be a part of the mission.
Maybe one last question, or if there isn't one, perhaps it's the perfect moment to thank our speakers and thank you, the audience, for listening so attentively. Thank you, Fulbright. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Therese. And Penelope, and everyone who's made this happen. It's wonderful that the visual arts have been given this special attention. I think we feel pretty pleased with that. So thank you all, and good evening.